a man accidentally arrived on the island of tiny people, tied up from head to toe with ropes. Even his size 35 canvas shoes were locked. With a mighty roar from Paul, wooden stakes were uprooted. When he stood up, he was convinced he must be dreaming. Just then the general rode toward him on a steed, hurling a spear straight at him. Several soldiers threw hooks that latched onto Paul's ample rear end, pulling with all their might. Paul couldn't withstand it, falling flat on his backside, knocking himself out cold. When he woke again, he was bound tightly to a cart, being wheeled into the tiny kingdom. Curious onlookers gathered to gawk. Paul was treated like a monster. At the palace gates, they stood Paul upright. Even the well-traveled princess had never seen such a giant man. The next day Paul was taken to the fields, hitched to a plow like an ox. Suddenly the palace came under attack. The general quickly turned the reins, commanding Paul back to defend the palace. Paul broke into a sprint, covering 60 kilometers per second. The general ordered Paul to kneel, leaping down to rescue the princess alone, commanding all soldiers to stand down. But Karl knew the general was bluffing, so he freed Paul from his restraints, begging him to save the princess. In the nick of time, Paul arrived first, plucking up 2 assassins, tossing them into the fish pond with ease. The battle was over before the general arrived. The princess thanked Paul profusely. With the king still trapped in the burning palace, Paul rushed to help, attempting to reach through the flames. He scorched his hand. Thinking fast, he dropped his giant underpants, releasing a golden torrent, dousing the flames completely. Though the aroma left much to be desired, the results were effective. The competitive general arrived just then. Paul turned instinctively, the last few drops landing squarely on the general. When the king emerged, the air hung thick with an unmistakable pungency. Fortunately, the king wasn't angry, hailing Paul as their savior. A grand feast was prepared that evening. Paul shoveled entire platters into his mouth, barely making a dent. Yet this didn't stop his tall tales, claiming to be Ultraman, specializing in defeating rebellious monsters. His own lies nearly convincing himself. The tiny people gazed up in awe. The next day, to express their gratitude, the king commissioned a seaside villa for their giant protector. Paul's life reached new heights, having servants brew his coffee, dozens giving back massages, even thousands joining his movie nights. As time passed, the king grew to rely on Paul, awarding him a Medal of Honor. This threatened the general's position. In revenge, he secretly disabled the kingdom's defenses. Enemies seized the opportunity, bombarding the palace, launching a full-scale invasion. Seeing the danger, the quick-witted Karl rushed to Paul's villa. As the kingdom's hero, Paul couldn't ignore the crisis. He marched to the king, ready to receive his orders.